We feel through our minds, not through any physical organs of sense, and our minds are directly responsive to thought. If we should feel coldness in some particular and definite circumstances, we undergo that sensation with our minds, and our spirit bodies in no way suffer. We are never continuously reminded of them. In the realm of which I am now speaking, all is exactly attuned to its inhabitants. The temperature, its landscape, its many dwellings, the waters of the rivers and streams, and, most important of all, the inhabitants one with another. There is therefore nothing that can possibly create any unhappiness, unpleasantness, or discomfort. We can completely forget our bodies and allow our minds to have free play, and through our minds we can enjoy the thousands of delights that the same minds have helped to build up. At times we may feel saddened, and at times we are amused by those who, still upon the earth, ridicule and pour scorn and contempt upon our descriptions of the spirit lands. And what do these poor minds know? Nothing. And what would these same minds substitute for the realities of the spirit world? They do not know. They would take away from us our beautiful countryside, our flowers and trees, our rivers and lakes, our houses, our friends, our work, and our pleasures and recreations. For what? What conception can these dull minds have of a world of spirit? By their own stupid admissions, no conception whatsoever. They would turn us into wraiths, without substance, without intelligence, and merely surviving in some dim, shadowy, vaporous state, dissevered from everything that is human. In my perfect health and abounding vitality, and living among all the beauties of this world of strict reality, a mere hint of which I have only so far given you, I am forcibly impressed by the magnitude of ignorance shown by particular minds upon earth. The time has come, I felt, when I would like to see something of this wonderful land, and so in company with my friend, we set forth on what was for me a voyage of discovery. Those of you who have traveled the earth for the sake of seeing new lands will understand how I felt at the outset. To obtain a wider view, we walked to some higher ground, whence a clear panorama unfolded before the eyes. Before us, the countryside reached out in a seemingly unending prospect. In another direction, I could clearly perceive what had all the appearance of a city of stately buildings, for it must be remembered that all people here do not possess a uniformity of taste, and that even as on earth, many prefer the city to the country, and vice versa, while again some like both. I was very keenly interested to see what a spirit city could be like. It seemed easy enough to visualize the country here, but cities seem so essentially the work of man in a material world. On the other hand, I could advance no logical reason why the spirit world should not also build cities. My companion was greatly amused by my enthusiasm, which he declared was equal to a schoolboy's. It was not his first acquaintance with it, however. Most people, when they first arrive, are taken in the same way, and it affords our friends a never-ending pleasure to show us round. I could see a church in the distance, built on the usual lines externally, and it was proposed that we might go in that direction and include other things on the way. And so we set off. We followed the path that led for part of the way beside a brook, whose clear water sparkled in the light of the heavenly sun. As the water pursued its course, it gave forth many musical notes that constantly changed and weaved themselves into a medley of the most dulcet sounds. We drew to the edge, and I might look at it closer. It seemed to be almost like liquid crystal, and as the light caught it, it scintillated with all the colors of the rainbow. I let some of the water run over my hand, expecting it, by its very look, to be icy cold. What was my astonishment to find that it was delightfully warm, but still more, it had an electrifying effect. which extended from my hand right up the arm. It was a most exhilarating sensation, and I wondered what it would be like to bathe fully within it. My friend said that I should feel myself being charged with energy, but there was not a sufficient depth of water to immerse myself in it properly. I should have the opportunity as soon as we came to a larger body of water to indulge in a bath. When I withdrew my hand from the brook, I found that the water flowed off in flashing drops, leaving it quite dry. We resumed our walk, and my friend said he would like to take me to visit a man who lived in a house which we were now approaching. We walked through some artistically laid out gardens, crossed a well-turfed lawn, and came upon a man seated at the outskirts of a large orchard. As we drew near, he rose to meet us. My friend and he greeted one another in the most cordial fashion, and I was introduced as a new arrival. It was explained to me that this gentleman prided himself upon the fruit in his orchard, and I was invited to sample some of it. The owner of this pleasant retreat seemed to be a man of middle years, as far as I could judge, though he could have been much older than he appeared to be at first sight. I have since learned that to try to guess the ages of people here is a difficult and almost dangerous task, for you must know, to digress a little, that it is the law that as we progress spiritually, so do we shake off the semblances of age as it is known on earth. We lose the wrinkles that age and worldly care have marked upon our countenances, together with other indications of the passage of years, and we become younger in appearance while we grow older in knowledge and wisdom and spirituality. I am not suggesting that we assume an exterior of extreme juvenility, nor do we lose those external indications of personality. To do that would make us all of a deadly uniformity, but we do, in truth, return or advance according to our age when we pass into spirit toward what we have known as the prime of life. To resume, our host led us into the orchard, where I beheld many trees in a high state of cultivation and in full fruit. He looked at me for a moment, and then he took us to a splendid tree that looked strongly like a plum tree. The fruit was perfect in shape, with a deep, rich coloring, and it hung in great clusters. Our host picked some of it and handed it to us, telling us that it would do us both good. The fruit was quite cool to the touch, and it was remarkably heavy for its size. Its taste was exquisite. The flesh was soft without being difficult or unpleasant to handle, and a quantity of nectar-like juice poured out. My two friends watched me closely as I ate the plums, each bearing upon his face an expression of mirthful anticipation. As the juice of the fruit streamed out, I fully expected to spill an abundance of it upon my clothes. To my amazement, although the juice descended upon me, I could find, upon examination, no traces of it. My friends laughed uproariously at my astonishment, and I thoroughly enjoyed the joke. But I was much mystified. They hastened to explain to me that as I am now in an incorruptible world, anything that is unwanted immediately returns to its own element. The fruit juice that I thought I had spilled upon myself had returned to the tree from which the fruit was picked. Our host informed me that the particular type of plum which I had just eaten was one that he always recommends to people who have but newly arrived in spirit. It helps to restore the spirit, especially if the passing has been caused by illness. He observed, however, that I did not present the appearance of having had a long illness, and he gathered that my passing had been fairly sudden, which was quite true. I had had only a very short illness. The various fruits that were growing were not only for those who needed some form of treatment after their physical death, but all enjoyed eating thereof for its stimulating effect. He hoped that if I had no fruit trees of my own, or even if I had, I should come as often as I liked and help myself. The fruit is always in season, he added, in great amazement. amusement, and you will never find any of the trees without plenty of fruit on them. In response to my question as to how they grow, he replied, like so many other questions in this land, the answer was only possible from those of the higher realm. And even if we were told that answer, there is more than a strong probability that we should not understand until such time as we ourselves went to dwell in those realms. We are quite content, he said in effect, to take so many things just as they are without inquiring into how they came about, and we know that those things provide a never-failing supply because they come from a never-failing source. There is no real need to delve into such matters, and most of us are quite content to enjoy them with heartfelt thanks. As to the actual supply of fruit, our host said that all he knew was that he picked his fruit. When he picked his fruit, other fruit came and took its place. It never over-ripened because it was perfect fruit, and, like ourselves, imperishable. He invited us to walk through the orchard, where I saw every kind of fruit known to man, and many that were known only in spirit. I sampled some of the latter, but it is impossible to give any indication of the delicious flavor of them, because there is no earthly fruit that I know of with which comparison can be made. We can only at any time give such an indication to the senses by comparison with that which we have already experienced. If we have not had that experience, then we are at a complete and absolute loss to convey any new sensation. And nowhere is this more appreciable than in the sense of taste. My friend explained to our genial host that he was escorting me around to show me the land of my new life, and the latter gave us many good wishes to speed us upon our way. He repeated his invitation to visit him whenever I wished, and even if he were not about at the time of any call I might make, I was to help myself to the fruit to my heart's content. He said I should find that the fruit trees would perform the duties of a host as well as, even better than, he could. And so, with further expressions of thanks and goodwill, we again set forth. We returned to our former path beside the brook and continued our walk in the direction of the church. After we had proceeded for a little way, I noticed that the brook began to broaden out until it expanded into the dimensions of a fair-sized lake. We could see many groups of happy people gathered at the side of the water, some of whom were bathing. The lake was bounded by an encirclement of trees, and there were flowers in abundance, arranged in such a way that although a certain orderliness was observable, yet there was no hint of distinct ownership. They belonged, wait a minute, I've skipped over something. I noticed that the brook began to broaden out, expanded into the dimensions of a fair-sized lake. We could see many groups of happy people gathered at the side of the water, some of whom were bathing. The lake was bounded by an encirclement of trees, and there were flowers in abundance, arranged in such a way that although a certain orderliness was observable, yet there was no hint of distinct ownership. They belonged to all in equal right, and I observed most particularly that no attempt was made by anyone to pick or root up or otherwise disturb them. One or two people were to be seen with both their hands placed around some of the blooms in almost a caressing manner, an action which seemed to me so unusual that I asked my friend for enlightenment on the matter. He replied by taking me over to a young girl who was thus curiously occupied. I was rather diffident of so intruding, but I was told to wait and see. My friend bent down beside her, and she turned her head and gave him a friendly word and smile of welcome. I concluded that they were old friends, but such was not the case. In fact, he told me afterward that he had never seen her before, and he explained that here in spirit we need no formal introductions. We constitute one large, united gathering in the matter of ordinary social intercourse. After we had been here a little while and become accustomed to our new environment and mode of living, we find that we never intrude, since we can read at once the mind of a person who wishes for a period of seclusion. And when we see people out in the open, in garden or countryside, we are always welcome to approach and hold friendly converse with them. This young lady was, like myself, a newcomer, and she told us how some friends had shown her the method of gathering from the flowers all that the flowers had so lavishly to give. I bent down beside her, and she gave me a practical demonstration of what to do. By placing the hand, she said, around the flower so as to hold it in a sort of cup, I should feel the magnetism running up my arms. As I moved my hands toward a beautiful bloom, I found that the flower upon its stem moved toward me. I did as I was instructed, and I instantly felt a stream of life rushing up my arms, the while a most delicious aroma was exhaled by the flower. She told me not to pick the flowers because they were forever growing. They were part of this life, even as we ourselves. I was very grateful for her timely admonition, since it was the most natural thing in the world to pick flowers that were already in such profusion. It was not quite the same in the case of the fruit, I learned, because the fruit was meant to be consumed, but the flowers were themselves decorative, and to cut down the flower by picking it was equivalent to cutting down the fruit trees. There were flowers, however, that were growing expressly for the purpose of being picked, but these, under immediate consideration, had as their principal function that of health-giving. I inquired of our young friend if she had tried some of the good fruit we had just sampled, and she replied that she had. My friend suggested that I might like to go closer to the water, and that if the young lady were alone, perhaps she would to join us in our excursions. She responded that nothing would give her greater pleasure, and so we all three moved toward the lake. I explained to her that my friend was a seasoned inhabitant of these lands, and that he was acting as my guide and adviser. She seemed to be glad of our company, not that she was lonely, for a thing does not exist in this realm, but she had had few friends while on earth, and had always lived something of a solitary life, although she had never on that account been indifferent to or unmindful of the cares and sorrows of others. Since coming into spirit, she had found so many kindly souls of similar disposition to herself, and she supposed that perhaps we had been in like case. I told her briefly a few things about myself, as I was still wearing my earthly attire, that is to say, its counterpart. She knew me more or less for what I had been professionally, my friend being similarly clothed. She laughingly said that she felt she was in safe hands. It was recalled to my mind what had been said about bathing. Was I rather at a loss how to broach the matter of the necessary equipment for the purpose? However, my friend saved the situation, referring to it himself. All we needed for the purpose of enjoying a bath was the necessary water in which to bathe. Nothing could be simpler. We were just to go into the water precisely as we were. Whether we could swim or not was of no consequence. And I must say I was astonished at this strange departure from the usual procedure, and I naturally hesitated a little. However, my friend quite calmly walked into the lake until he was thoroughly immersed, and the two of us followed his example. What I was expecting to result from this I cannot say. At least I anticipated the customary effect of water upon one in similar circumstances on earth. Great then was my surprise and my relief when I discovered that the water felt more like a warm cloak thrown around me than the penetration of liquid. The magnetic effect of the water was of like nature to the brook into which I had thrust my hand, but here the revivifying force enveloped the whole body, pouring new life into it. It was delightfully warm and completely buoyant. It was possible to stand upright in it, to float upon it, and of course to sink completely beneath the surface of it without the least discomfort or danger. Had I paused to think, I might have known that the latter was inevitably bound to be the case. The spirit is indestructible, but beyond this magnetic influence there was an added assurance that came from the water, and that was its essential friendliness, if I may so call it. It is not easy to convey any ideal of this fundamentally spiritual experience. That the water was living, one could have no doubt. It breathed its very goodness by its contact, and extended its heavenly influence individually to all who came within it. For myself, I experienced a spiritual exaltation as well as a vital regeneration, to such an extent that I quite forgot my initial hesitancy and the fact that I was fully clothed. The latter now presented a perfectly natural situation, and this was further enhanced by my observing my two companions. My old friend, of course, was perfectly used to the water, and our new friend seemed to have accommodated herself rapidly to new usages. My mind was saved further perturbation when I recalled that as I withdrew my hand from the brook, the water ran off of it, leaving it quite dry. I was already prepared then for what ensued as we came out of the lake. As I emerged, the water merely ran away, leaving my clothes just as they were before. It had penetrated the material just as air or atmosphere on earth will do, but it had left no visible or palpable effect whatever. We and our clothes were perfectly dry.